Good evening. My February 6th African-American birthday belongs to a man who was the son of a reverend in Kansas City, Missouri. He would later go on to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and become educated and learn a love of poetry and learn to teach himself, where he would teach some of the country's future civil rights activists. Some of these activists would change segregation laws. He would also inspire Hollywood's Denzel Washington and media's Oprah Winfrey. He would even go on to perform some civic duties in politics himself. His name is Melvin Tolson. Melvin Tolson was an American poet, educator, columnist, and politician. Melvin was born to a Reverend Alonzo Tolson, Methodist, and Elira Hunt Tolson, a seamstress of African Creek Indian ancestry. Alonzo, Melvin's father, was son of an enslaved woman and her white master. Melvin graduated from Lincoln High School in Kansas City, Missouri in 1919 and eventually would graduate from Lincoln University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania with honors. Melvin met his wife in Philadelphia at Lincoln University, Ruth Southall of Charlottesville, Virginia. They had 4 children. Soon after their marriage, Melvin was hired to teach speech and English at Wiley College in Marshall, Texas, a small, historically black Methodist Episcopal college. He taught at Wiley, which had a high reputation amongst blacks, for 23 years. It was here where Tolson left his greatest mark on history. If Denzel Washington has anything to do with it. Melvin took a leave of absence in 1930-31 to study for his master's degree at Columbia University, where his thesis was based on interviews with members of the Harlem Renaissance, a movement of the arts. The Harlem Renaissance was a movement of the arts in the black community. And his poetry was strongly influenced by his time in New York. Melvin would mentor future civil rights activists when he would return to Wiley College. He would mentor James Farmer, who served alongside Martin Luther King Jr. James Farmer was the initiator and organizer of the first Freedom Ride, which occurred in 1961, and those led his freedom rides were led to desegregate the interstate transportation, which wasn't being enforced by the federal government. The laws of desegregation, the laws of segregated busing through different states wasn't being enforced by the federal government. And one of Melvin's students, James Farmer, helped the desegregation happen. One of his students was also Herman Sweet. And Sweet would one day have his name on a case that would be seen by the Supreme Court of the United States in Sweet versus Painter. And that was to challenge the separate but equal doctrine established by the case of Plessy versus Ferguson. Separate but equal doctrine. Has to do with segregation, which was established in the 1898 case of Plessy versus Ferguson, which was a case that segregation could occur, but supposedly everyone was going to be treated equally, but they had to be segregated. But it was not illegal for segregation to occur as long as equality was occurring in this segregation. But in Sweet versus Painter, one of Melvin's students was involved in that case. It had to do with his admittance to law school. He wasn't being fairly admitted with the laws, and he in the case of Sweat versus Painter was forced, probably because of Sweet's feelings that this wasn't fair. And that case would eventually, he would win the case, and it would eventually influence Brown versus Board of Education, which was the monumental case precedence that would eventually make it illegal for schools to be segregated. So one of Melvin's students was influential in helping the decision to be made in the case of Brown versus the Board of Education. It was at Wiley College that Melvin established a debate team and pioneered interracial college debates against white colleges. That fighting spirit in debate educated these future leaders in the black community, and Melvin was responsible for that. It was in the creation of his debate teams that Melvin left his greatest mark, according to many, such as Denzel Washington and Oprah Winfrey. Competing against the University of Southern California and the University of Michigan. Little Wiley College was competing against the University of Southern California and the University of Michigan. In 1947, Melvin would begin teaching at Langston, Oklahoma, at Langston University, and taught there for 17 years. At Langston, Melvin was a dramatist and director of the Dust Bowl Theater. One of his students was Nathan Hare, who would become a psychologist, activist, academic, and psychologist, who taught at the San Francisco State and Howard in Washington. He would become involved in the Black Power movement at Howard and was a co-founder of the Black Scholar, which was a journal of Black studies and research. Melvin Tolson was also a poet and columnist. His 1941 poem, Dark Symphony, in the Atlantic Monthly is believed by some to be his greatest work. His libretto for Republic of Liberia, 1953, is considered a major modernistic work. Melvin's final work to appear during his lifetime was the long poem Harlem Gallery, published in 1965. It was a much different work than his previous. The poem concentrated on African American life, a striking change from his previous works. Composed, Harlem Gallery was more of a composition that had a jazzy style. It was more quick, but it was dense and rich, which kind of tells you that as he was getting older, maybe he was kind of maybe less fighting spirit, more interflection going on in just the life of the black person instead of the life of possibly. I'm just guessing. I'm kind of guessing just the names of the titles and then what I'm reading about here. Tolson served as mayor of Langston, Oklahoma for 3 terms, 1954 to 1960. In 2007, his biography was depicted on the big screen in the film The Great Debaters, produced by Oprah Winfrey and starring Denzel Washington. The film told the story of Melvin Tolson and the debate team he created at the historically black Wiley College in Marshall, Texas, that pioneered interracial college debates against white colleges in the segregated South. Melvin died on the 29th of August, 1966, after cancer surgery in Dallas, Texas, and is buried in Guthrie, Oklahoma.